Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. A very good evening from Abunx. So this is Erica Shuvra Halder again to continue the series that we have started in last month, focusing on the building facilitation skills and moderation skills. So as per our previous commitment, our today's episode is going to be focused on active listening, which is again a very initial skill that should be inherited by a good facilitator and a moderator by themselves. So, as you have heard earlier, in Abunx platform, we are actually promoting and fostering to, you know, initiate the learning platform of Abunx for all of the spares development practitioners from starting entry level freshers towards the middle senior level and towards the topmost senior levels. So in Abunx, as per our principles, we believe in abundance mindset and co-creation of any problematic situation solutionary mechanisms. So that's why, as another initiative from Abunx platform, we started this series, which is basically focused on building facilitation and moderation skills. So as I stated earlier, our today's session will be focused on active listening. So we all are actually committed to be a good listener, but what actually means to us when we heard the word that is active listening? Most of the time, uh, it actually reflects like it's saying, meaning to us like not allowing any interruptions. That's actually gives us the definition of active listening when we don't interrupt at all and we actually allow the speaker to speak on his or her topic and the listener actually gives his full enthusiasm to hear or listen towards the audience. So the facilitator's role is very crucial if in any kind of discussion, even if it is a strategic discussion or a planning discussion or an implementation session, because the facilitator or moderator plays a very important role in any kind of discussion because he or she, who is the facilitator, is actually the lead person in the discussion who actually drives the discussion towards a very fruitful output. So to understand the audience's vibes, to understand their mindset, to understand their beliefs, and to inherit and bypass own belief system and to give an empathetic listening approach towards the audience is the actually the skill of the facilitator who is an effective one. So the facilitator's job is not only to give emphasis on what people hear, but also to acknowledge and assure their key points, what they're trying to express in any kind of discussion. Because the facilitator later, if the facilitator assures that, yeah, I have heard what you have said, and acknowledge by paraphrasing, which I'll be covering in my very fourth episode, it actually gives the preference or the value to the audience that, yeah, my points are well taken by the facilitators and it's given importance and it's stated in the finalizing summarization session and is acknowledged. So then the audience feel that, yeah, we are valued, and the overall discussion output comes to a very fruitful one. So there are so many articles in web if you search. I was following in Dr. Joe's article, and it was stating some three contexts of listening. So the first context was internal listening. It's actually the most famous listening context of listening because it actually reflects that when we have our own belief and internal mindset within ourselves before we speak or listen to someone, that, oh yeah, I know about this word or I know about this jargon, what is this meaning. So whatever he or she is saying, at end of the day or end of the minute, I will actually focus on what I know. So most of the time, most of us actually do this unconsciously, which is called internal listening. And the second, context of listening is listening to others, listening to the person. So this is actually the state when a good and effective, facilitator gives emphasize and prioritize the speaker's point of view, bypassing their own mindset and viewpoints. So this is actually the one that we are looking for. So the very third context of listening is listening to what's going on in this world, which is the mass environment thing. So here the facilitator tries to reflect on some of the good evidences from the external sources and from the enabling environment, which actually relates to the topics and discussion on the context. So it actually gives always a very emphasis on putting down general and global evidences for the facilitators, because it actually helps the facilitator to dig down to the problem more, or to contextualize any kind of problematic situation and structure it throughout the discussions. And it helps to go to the next skills also, which is like questioning, when you are scaffolding, when you are trying to dig into the deep dive, and when the facilitator is trying to go towards the goal of the session. So that's how, when listening to the what's going on in the world stages. So actually, listening and belief system is correlated, as I stated in the first context, that internal listening stage, because a belief system is own belief system set of personal perspective, which is our mindset that we actually inherited from our, the concept, from our environment, from our community, from our society. So this belief system mostly influence the facilitators to internalize the speaker's point of view. So according to Stephen Hobbit, seven habits of effective uh, people, he always stated that truly listening means to transcend your own autobiography. I actually loved his this statement that he said that to truly listen means to transcend your uh, autobiography, to get out of your own belief system, and out of your own history, out of your own comfort zone, and out of your judgments, and out of your any kind of reference viewpoints, and when you emphasize actually on others belief system, that's called the empathic listening. So now I will focus on 5 levels of listening. So the first level is again very common one, when we actually ignore the speaker, when we hold very strongly towards our own belief system, our perceptions. And the second level of listening is that sometimes we do pretend to listen, but we actually are not listening. We are holding again very strictly towards our own belief system, and we are just pretending, maintaining eye contacts, and assuring them that, yeah, I'm listening to you. So the third level of listening is actually when you being a very good and effective facilitator, that's called selective listening. Here you actually, by contacting eyes with the speaker, giving emphasize again on what that speaker is saying, outsiding own perceptions, and then internalizing and digging down, trying to understand what state of mind he is trying to reflect and express. That's called selective listening. And the next level of listening then comes into the attentive listening, that when you're really focusing on to the point that the speaker is trying to express. So this is the highest second level of the listening skill. and which actually gives you the top listening skill of fifth level, that is empathic listening. That's actually when the facilitator is very effective in retaining the speaker's key points and key understandings. The main thing is here, not understood, just being understandable. That, yeah, the effective facilitators is trying to understand the viewpoint of the speaker from the core of the beliefs of the speakers, rather than sticking towards his own or her own perception or perspective. So that's the empathic listening. So it's a very, empathic listening skill is a very rare skill among all the facilitators. But an effective facilitator and moderator, uh, when he or she have this empathic listening skill, is actually more than a skill. Because at this level, without empathic, without information processing in your mindset, you can't actually retain or internalize or relate with what I stated before, with the core problem uh, of the issue, with what is the discussion based on, or drag the audience towards the solution based statements. So that's the main role of the facilitator, and empathic listening is the, I would say, the key skill. And as I stated, that is more than a skill of an effective facilitator. So as Stephen Covey said, that listening is a deliberate action, not simply a state of being. So that's absolutely true. And from my own working experience, I would definitely say, from my seniors, they always have emphasized, on giving listening skill also more, you know, focus, besides your other knowledge and other facilitation skills. So one of the Professor Judy Brownell also discussed about the Harrier model, which actually stated about six process of listening. At first stage, as we normally do, is just hearing, and then at the second stage, we started, understanding, engage in the discussion, and start going into the layer that the speaker is actually expressing or uh, stating examples, and then remembering the things, like, oh yeah, the effective facilitator actually took notes of in their mind, that what the speakers is saying, after remembering, understanding their points. And then the next step is obviously interpreting. And interpreting is a very interesting process of listening, where the effective facilitator actually um, not only recognize the verbal signs or verbal communication from the speaker, but also an effective facilitator also addresses the non-verbal and especially the paraverbal actions of the speaker. And this is a very interesting level, which is called interpreting of listening, because in my own experiences, I have seen the as being a facilitator point of view, and also being facilitated by others, that when the facilitator is into this interpreting steps, it actually comes to the point where he or she addresses your motion, your, as I said, non-verbal actions. Because if you are assertive, what is your vibe? Is it positive or negative? What is the judgment about the topic? You can inherit with the interpreting step, actually. So the next step of the listening after interpreting is the evaluating things, that you finally in the facilitator's head, they actually evaluate that, yeah, this is the final direction where this speaker is moving on, and where I can drag them into the common point of discussion. So responding is the very last step of listening, or where the facilitator actually tries to, as I stated, that express um, that, yeah, by paraphrasing sometimes before summarizing, when he addresses, from remembering, from interpreting the speaker's point and paraphrasing them in the summarization, when they address that, yeah, these points, we are taking notes and we are giving, focus in the parking lot discussions also. That's called responding at the very last step of the listening skill. So as per Judy Brownell, who is the professor of management and organization behavior at Cornell School of Hotel Management, her article was really fruitful, stating the HURIER model, which is hearing, understanding, remembering, interpreting, evaluating, and responding. So these are the 6 skills of listening process. You can try to look onto the article if you're interested. So as my today's session is just the main focus on the key topics of the active listening of good facilitators. And as from Abunx platform, we always stated that we are prioritizing on co-creating different kind of research, training models, and also co-solutionary packages for our clients. So we always highlight on what our client needs. And as per the global demand and local context, we are always open and abundance about our any kind of service oriented queries. So feel free to post more queries in our Abunx platform if you want to know more about this listening skills or moderation skills and facilitator skills series topics in details. So we would be happy to organize as per your organization priorities. So as per Dr. Joe North, the self-reflection question I chose for today's session is very interesting. That I want to give 3, self-reflection questions to our audience today. That is, how well do you think you are listening today to this topic? So most of the time, we first can think in our head as a facilitator that how well actually I personally, rate myself that I listen most of the time. And then the next is that, am I listening effectively in any virtual and online session as I do in person ones? So this is also a very another self-reflectionary skills for the reflection questions for the facilitators who are doing over online, because sometimes these 2 methods are absolutely different, because in person we can internalize, we can interact with the audience, but in this virtual world in front of me I can only see myself on a screen, so we can't actually internalize what you guys are thinking right now. So perhaps the facilitation skills sometimes can lose its pace, or the motto. So it's very important to ask, as being a facilitator, like how my listening skills are happening here. So again, if we want to emphasize more on our assessing our listening skills, we should ask ourselves that in which part of the listening um, skill I want to increase, and which section I want to decrease. Sometimes it's like being a facilitator, we sometimes engage into a discussion which is absolutely not necessary at all, or sometimes when it's necessary to address the pinpoint of the discussion, but we are pulling that besides and just focusing on what is our session outline. It's also sometimes demotivates the audience, or drag them out of the attention. So all of these are very important to assess your own listening skills, that where I am, which part of my listening skills I should increase and which part I should decrease. So I am putting down these 3 reflectionary questions today, and I'm eager to announce that our next series on this facilitation and moderation skill would be focusing on um, questioning, which is very important. We will practice some scaffolding techniques too in our that online session, and I'm hopeful we will get some audience over there too. And In Abunx platform, I am happy to reflect and resonate with our management's global movement, which is the plantation, and this is the step towards the global to combat the global warming around us. And being an individual and aware citizen, we can start the small initiative from our point to influence our greater community and society. So let's influence from our side and try to save the world by doing this very little from our side. So Abunx is actually uh, fostering, promoting the plantation tree series from our platform. And we are also delighted to announce that Abunx and senior management, who are most of the family members, is going to promote Oxfam's 50 years Jubilee program also. And tomorrow we are going to have a live stream discussion with Oxfam's country director. So don't forget to enjoy the live session from Abunx platform. So I am signing off today from our episode second of this facilitation and moderation skills. And I would be happy and delighted if you post any kind of question or queries in our Abunx page, or you can email us also for further discussions or put any kind of service needs. So thank you all, and a very good evening, good night from this side of the world to all other side members there around me and besides me and far beside me. I mean, far away me. So bye bye. Have a good day and night.